Loco. So this is one of the pubs. Duke William is the
tower.
Today is the 12th day of Christmas. It's January the 6th. Today, a collective game will be contested in Haxey, in the west of England. Two teams will be ritually competing for a strange leather cylinder called the hood. They will have to sway it and to bring it into one of the place's pubs. But first, it's time for drinking and for singing.
Find employ, for to plough and to sow and to reap and to mow and to be a farmer's boy and to be a farmer's boy. My father's dead, my mother's left, my children large and small. And what's the worst for my mother still, I'm the eldest of them all. Though little I be, no work I fear if I can find employ. For to plough and to sow and to reap and to mow and to be a farmer's boy and to be a farmer's boy. If that you, no boy, do want one favour I do ask you, to shelter me till break of day from this whole winter's night. At the break of day I will trudge away elsewhere to find employ. For to plough and to sow and to reap and to mow and to be a farmer's boy and to be a farmer's boy. Farmer's wife, right try the lad, no further let him see. Oh yes, if the daughter cried while the tears roll down her cheeks. For it's he that will work, it is hard for to want and to wander for employ. So don't turn him away, but pray let him stay and to be a farmer's boy and to be a farmer's boy. Length of time he grew a man, the good old farmer he had. He left the lad, the farm that he had, and a daughter for his bride. Now he blesses the day he came that way, and to be a farmer's boy, and to be a farmer's boy. Fast on a cart, and they wheeled him around and around again, till they wheeled him into a barn, and there they made a mould of him, and with that they thought no harm, and with that they thought no harm. Then they hired men with a flail so sharp, and they flickered flesh from his bones. One of the mill used him for 10 times worse, falling round in between 2 stones. Falling round in between 2 stones. You can pour red wine into a glass, pour brandy into a can. You can pour St. John in a nut brown jug, and you'll make the merriest man. And you'll make the merriest man. He'll make a maid dance around his room, stark naked as ever she was born. He'll make a parson pawn his boots for a little John Barleycorn. For a little John Barleycorn. He'll turn your gold into silver, your silver into brass. He'll make a man become a fool, and a fool become an ass, and a fool become an ass.
As everybody here would agree, the most important thing to do before playing the game is to get deep into the tunes and the songs. Singing is important indeed to set up the atmosphere of the game.
Show them with our swords and our cutlasses, we'll fight until we die.
Yeah, you can.
Before that they shall come and drink old England dry, and dry,
Camelbacks with that.
and dry, boys, they'll
Yeah, mine went to it's obviously big, so you just get ready for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't do beer, you know.
come and drink old England dry.
Yeah, you put spirit in it. You could get
St. Lord Roberts, so fair and renowned.
When we finish this, we'll go round the side, see what's going on there.
Country and his crown. For the cannons they shall rattle, and the bullets they shall fly,
an actual bladder in it. Yeah.
Before that they shall come and drink old England dry,
That'd be awesome.
and dry, and dry, boys they'll try. Before that they shall come and drink old England dry. Boots against tune against tune. If a man meets a man, knock him down. But don't.
Even if the game is supposed to be great fun, the last refrain recalls its warlike origins. It goes like this: house against house, town against town. If a man meets a man, knock him down. A final line, but don't hurt him, is believed to have been added by a local clergyman in order to make the game more acceptable in the beginning of the 20th century. 12 officials, known as the boggins, are in charge of the day's activities. They all wear red clothes, and 2 of them also wear extravagant hats decorated with feathers and badges. A 13th character, Haxey Fool, is dressed in rags. He will play the most prominent part in the ritual. In this Christmas time, it seems quite evident that these 12 men represent either the 12 apostles, either the 12 months of the coming year. But is the crowd really aware of this? Anyway, now it's time to go outside. After the songs, the crowd gathers in front of the pub. A few pints have already been drunk, which explains the rather communicative feelings of the people who have come to celebrate the ritual. The people here are mainly locals, but there are also a lot of journalists and a few people who describe themselves as fans of English folklore. According to Hugh Hornby, who has studied traditional football games all over the country, the Haxey ritual is part of what he calls uppies and downies games, where a ball is usually in the heart of the contest.
Country and its crown, for the cannons they shall rattle, and the bullets they shall fly, shall fly. Before that they shall come and drink old England dry, and dry, and dry, me boys they'll try. Before that they shall come and drink old England dry. House again house, turn against turn. If a man meets a man, knock him down, but don't touch him.
The same songs are ritually sung in the 4 different pubs of the town, where all the people actively prepare for the game.
Okay, but it's not an abrupt game in that sense of knocking something over. Then the playing would be much more fun. And as you know, Lauren, in Scotland.
The game is not only a time for drinking and singing. After Christmas time, it's also a time for greeting and wishing neighbors a happy new year. Besides the journalists, the ritual also attracts folklore specialists like Doc Rowe, who has been documenting the game for decades.
Start Turn your gold into silver, your silver into brass. He'll make a man become a fool, and a fool become an ass. And a fool become an ass.
All the singing and the merrymaking progressively leads to a threshold. The threshold is at once a real one, because the crowd has indeed to exit the pubs to perform the game, and it is also a symbolical one, marking the way out of normal life to the liminal grounds where the game will be played. In Haxey, this idea of a threshold between normality and foolishness is clearly embodied by the character of the fool. The Haxey fool is led by the boggins and the crowd to a small square beside the local church. Here, the fool stands on a mounting stone and delivers a speech to the people. Historians have proposed different interpretations of this part of the ritual, where they find echoes of immemorial pagan midwinter practices. However, there is no need to go back so far in history to observe the paradox. This fool is wise enough to give an official speech.
Get some pork toast first and leave it for that. Just wait on a minute, George.
Jamie Hewitt! Let's go, guys! Watch out!
Who put the firelight in these trousers?
Don't we? Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to play the ancient game of Haxey Hood. I welcome you all from near and far, and trust you all will enjoy our ancient tradition. I should ask that all spectators respect the sound of laugh. And I demand that no bottles, glasses or cans shall be taken on that field. Upon yon hill the game will commence, when 12 sackles shall be thrown, a reward of £2 shall be given to each person who escapes these great boggins in red. When thou won the Smith thrown. Now weigh on, weigh at all times. He's 700 years old. So let and look after each. Well, tonight and we'll roast half a bullock. We can't afford a bullock in here. So we're going to catch that one we left running last year. As you can see, things are starting to warm up.
Hey!
Time for the game to begin. And it's time for you all to join in. And it's...
House again tone. It makes a man knock him down, but not let him.
The speech ends when the fire lit by the boggins begins to smoke the food. The damp straw from the fire makes a lot of thick smoke and forces the fool to stop speaking. From then on, action has to replace words, and after the fool has once more time recited the usual warlike Haxey refrain, everybody moves towards the field where the game is going to be contested. Once again, going to the field is like crossing a threshold, as the field is located outside the village, just between Haxey and Westwoodside, the two wards competing in the game. This field is the no man's land, where the temporary nonsense of the game will be able to happen. However, nonsense in this case doesn't mean there are no rules. On the contrary, all the sequences of the ritual remain strictly codified. On the field, there is only one single van selling hot dogs and fries. The people are totally caught by the game, and they even forget to eat. The first part of the game is called the running hood. 12 hoods are thrown up. The children have to catch them, run with them, and get them out through the boggins who patrol the edges of the field. If they manage, they get a £2 prize. Interestingly, the 12 boggins form a cordon which figures either the 12 hours of the day or the 12 months of the year. During this first part of the game, the atmosphere is quite peaceful. Journalists are able to ask for interviews, and parents teach the smaller children how to play the game. It doesn't take a long time for the 12 hoods to be won by the children. Around 3 p.m. the main event begins, known as the sway. It's now time to throw up the 13th hood, which will be contested by a large scrum of bodies.
Come on! You're alright, enough. That's good enough, that is. Pop it! Oh, right, we were a bramble, she dragged him to the tree as well.
There is always a lot of media coverage at this point of the ritual, just before the main game begins. The traditional refrain will be repeated one more time before the game starts. As in other places, the ritual scrum, the huge melee which forms the central part of the game here, has often been interpreted as a moment of chaos and wilderness. Two different reasons explain this sort of interpretation. First, journalists have often put a great emphasis on the exotic value of this type of rituals, leading to connect them with primitiveness and chaos. Second, the power and the law have regularly used the same idea because they were worried that the games would hide some revolutionary claims or plots.
Bring them a bottle.
Just slow
Slowly to the low. Get that dead man up. Slowly to the
When we stay in and round the scrum, we have a more comprehensive interpretation of the game. In spite of its chaotic aspect, the scrum is real fun for the people who participate. They often admit it's a rough game, but they would never call it violent. In fact, there is some strategy and a lot of camaraderie too. If violence sometimes occurs due to excitement, the observation of several matches shows that it's never a central feature in the game. On the contrary, if somebody falls down and might get hurt, the pushing stops and everyone tries to make room while the fallen player gets up.
I can't believe how long you showed me.
The scrum, otherwise known as the sway hood here in Haxey, usually lasts for hours, especially if there is a good balance between the Haxey team and the Westwoodside team. People in Haxey are usually very proud about the uniqueness of their game. In many respects, they are right, because it's the only game taking place on this date of the year and connected with the characters of the boggins and the fool. However, it's interesting to compare this game with similar rituals happening in other places at the same season. As a game, the Haxey Sway is comparable with the Royal Shrovetide Football in Ashbourne, with the Easter Games in Workington or Hallaton, and with a number of Scottish traditional ball games. Historically, all these events come from a French game known as la Soule, which could have been brought on the British Isles by the Normans. On a different ground, the Fool clearly connects the Haxey ritual with the time of Carnival, which traditionally began on January the 6th. Interestingly, the hats the boggins wear are the same we find for Carnival in Dunkirk, on the other side of the Channel in northern France. The night rapidly falls on the players, who can hardly see each other after a while. New strategies appear in the dark, which lead the game to a new stage.
That's what we need.
It just looks like
As in several traditional rituals, it's important to go through a blind stage before coming back to the light. This stage might be the climax of the ritual, the very moment when only little control is possible. However, nothing really happens at this moment, because everybody has its own role to play and must participate in the collective performance. Everybody is now stuck in the dark, and it's really freezing in the long winter night. At this stage, the game becomes really magnetic. It's hard to guess what's really happening with the hood and what's happening in general, but it would be impossible to leave the place now. After several hours trampling in the frosty fields, following the game becomes a good reason enough to stay until the end. At this stage, the players don't need any rational reason to play. The game has its own end in itself.
Die!
the end of a game, people always start to comment on it. They search for a meaning. Here in Haxey, some people tried to explain the game by historical reasons. They say it's a remnant of things past, when this kind of game was common all around the country. Some other people believe we still perform the game because we need to carry on our traditional rituals in order to face the crises and the problems of our modern world. Some people also think that the game's own competitive logic is enough to keep it going on. All these interpretations might be partly true, but they might be too rational as well. Emotions, freedom, and the idea of being together in an unusual place and at an unusual moment could be reasons strong enough for getting collectively involved in a game like this one. After a long time spent in the darkness of the fields, the scrum is now heading back to town. Wilderness and nonsense are left behind. It's time to go back to civilization. The game is over at last when the winning pub's landlord, keeping his feet inside the threshold, manages to touch the hood with his fingers. According to tradition, he will have to provide the drinks for free tonight, but the game is also believed to bring luck on him for the whole coming year. In recent years, the media have been quite concerned by young people's alcohol culture in the UK. This culture has been described as excessive and dangerous. However, this culture already existed in most of the traditional rituals and wasn't really seen as a problem. Maybe the problem only comes from the fact that today's alcohol culture is totally cut off from any rituals or any cultural meanings. Whatever the answer to this question, Haxey is now ready to begin a new year and a new cycle. No doubt there will be enough drinking, singing and a good sway at the end.